Hello everyone, welcome back to all of you in the Smelly Army. So today we're going to be having a look at some more of the most masculine smelling fragrances of all time. What do I mean when I say masculine smelling fragrances? Well, I'm going to be talking about fragrances that make you feel something like these guys. Okay, yes, hello, welcome back to everybody. So we're talking about masculine fragrances again. I've done two videos earlier in this kind of series and I've discovered some new ones that I wanted to share with you since then. So I'll put the links to the previous videos on this subject down there. And again, we've got some real hair on your chest kind of fragrances today. 5 more, I think. Now, of course, what do I mean by masculine smelling? That's a bit of a, it's not obvious what that means, but today's fresh fragrances that are released by designer houses tend to smell very nice most of the time, but a bit unisex smelling. Most of them, a woman could wear them fine. They smell soapy and fresh and clean, and that's great. Or you get some very sweet smells now for men, even La Nuit de l'Homme, classic one from a few years back, but there's a lot of sweetness and spiciness in there, but it doesn't smell really incredibly masculine in and of itself. Or you've got things like 1 Million, PACO, RABANNE, Ferragamo, Uomo. All of these have a lot more sweetness than fragrances of yesteryear. In the old days, notes like oak moss, patchouli, heavy woody tones, tobacco, maybe some boozy whiskey type notes were much more prominent in the fragrances. They smelled a little bit more grown up and mature, and those are the kind of fragrances we're going to be looking at today, a real trip back in history. So let's get stuck straight into it, and the first one that I want to share with you is Oscar de la Renta pour Lui. Oscar de la Renta pour Lui. 1980 release, this one. I've got a vintage eau de toilette splash here that I picked up on eBay, and a really classic, simple bottle design. And this one often compared to Chanel's ANTAEUS, which featured in one of my previous videos. Some of the notes include aldehydes, juniper, lavender, basil, bergamot, cinnamon, vetiver, geranium, leather, sandalwood, musk, and oak moss. Many of those fragrance notes, pretty much all of them, could be in a modern fragrance, but it's when you smell it rather than looking at the note listing that you really get the difference. So this one, definitely does have some similarities with Chanel's ANTAEUS. I've got it on a little strip here. It opens up actually very soapy and fresh and clean. There's a certain sweetness and this zinginess. I think it's the juniper note that actually is quite noticeable in this one. Beautiful fresh soapiness, but then underlying this, a rugged, manly, mossy kind of undertone. I definitely pick up on quite a bit of leather, and maybe there's some castoreum. That's an animalic note from beavers actually that smells a little bit leathery, and it's got this really grown up, manly, mossy green kind of feel, some woodiness, and there is a certain sweetness, but it's always tempered by this sort of mossy green manliness in there, and a leathery feel that's very grown up, very mature, fresh, but yet it really smells of the 80s in a way that if you remember an aftershave that your dad or your uncle or even your granddad used to wear, it's got that undertone, but it is really classy, a really, really beautiful, nice smell, and so different to what we get on the shelves today. A lot of the ingredients in this one perhaps can't be actually used anymore, but probably many designers wouldn't want to use them because they're not really in tune with the modern zeitgeist of what's popular in men's fragrances. But if you can pick up a vintage bottle, definitely worth tracking down on eBay. The modern version, quite close but not quite the same, but it will do you if you can't track down a vintage one. Good news, the vintage, not a hyped up thing that's going to cost you hundreds of pounds on eBay, so just hang out on eBay. You can probably pick one up. Beautiful fragrance, and really happy to have that one in my collection. Moving on then, a few years forward in time, 1992 saw the release of Ralph Lauren's Safari for Men. One of the best bottle designs ever, never mind the smell. That bottle design is absolutely classic, and it's still the same in the shops today. You can still buy it, sitting unloved on the bottom shelf in Boots in the UK normally. This is an older version. It's made by COSME, and they changed it around about 2000-ish. To a slightly different formula, which again, sadly, not quite what it was. Again, though, you can pick this one up if you hang out online on eBay. They tend not to be super hyped or overpriced in the UK. More of a soapy barbershop feel. So sometimes the manly thing, it doesn't have to be a sort of powerhouse, old school, in your face, animalic, leathery vibe, but maybe more of a fresh, clean, soapy barbershop shaving foam smell. And I think we get that to an extent here, but there is some spiciness as well. Again, some of the notes similar to what's going to be in a lot of these fragrances. You've got aldehydes again, more popular I think in the past than they are today. Artemisia, coriander, lavender, neroli, bergamot, lemon, lots of freshness. Carnation, jasmine, leather, patchouli, musk, oak moss. So I would say a little bit more this one, a barbershop, fresh, clean, but very masculine and grown up, kind of dry, arid smell about it. Some lovely spices, some aromatics. Lots of these kind of notes like basil and things like that are in these ones. I don't see basil listed there, but there's coriander. There's also florals going on in here, and I think there was more of a tendency to put quite a lot of different florals in these masculine fragrances, and that doesn't sound that manly, but they really had complexity and weren't just all about smelling rugged. But there's something about when you combine these sort of dandified florals, if you think of an old dandy in the 19th century, you know, a very dressed up kind of person, they kind of took that kind of idea but harnessed it with this real leathery, patchouli, musky oak moss denseness that once you smell it, you'll understand what it means. If you smell things like this, even Ralph Lauren's Polo Green, you get a real feeling for this. The modern version smells pretty similar, but is reputed not to last quite as well. Beautiful, fresh stuff, very likable in the modern age, perhaps a bit less dated than the other one, and a great kind of spicy barbershop woody scent that absolutely smells manly and very different to the modern approach of just trying to smell super fresh and transparent or sweet and trying to be sexy that way. This was manly sexiness. Moving on then, very similar one now, and lots of people compare this to Safari, and this is Yves Saint Laurent's Jazz. This was released a few years earlier in 1988, in fact. Again, the note listing doesn't tell us a huge amount. There's nutmeg, artemisia, lavender, basil, anise, cardamom, jasmine, geranium, lots of florals, leather, oak moss, tobacco and tonka. Again, it's fresh, it's quite green, it's spicy, and it's perhaps a bit more spicy and just a touch less soapy than the Safari, but a very similar description overall in how it smells and the kind of mood you'd want to be in to wear it. I really, really enjoy Jazz, and this again is the older formula. You can buy it in the La Collection series in a little square box now bottle, and it smells pretty similar to me. I don't know about the big differences in the formulas. Again, really nice and fresh and soapy, but there's this spiciness and an underlying ruggedness. Maybe it's the tobacco, the leather, the oak moss. I find with these it's quite hard to pick out obvious individual notes, and they tend to have really long note listings, and perfumers were really throwing in a lot of stuff in these fragrances, and it always came out with this very masculine vibe. But also a certain cleanness and freshness, but something that I perhaps think younger people, young ladies out there, if they smelled this on you today, might smell this and think, oh, it smells of old man. But you've just got to use your imagination a little bit and not be closed-minded, and these are beautiful smells that can really work, I think, perhaps mainly for people 30 and up in the modern world. So Jazz from Yves Saint Laurent, worth checking out, and certainly beautifully masculine stuff. Okay, now for a more recent edition. It was just in my last video, but one I think, where I picked up a couple of new things, and this is Paco Rabanne's Ténéré, a 1988 release, and Ténéré means, or it is the name of a desert in North Africa, I believe. So this, a real powerhouse from the 80s that has faded from memory for most people. Very obscure fragrance. Again, not super hard to get. It's discontinued, but I picked it up for a cheap price for this Eau de Toilette 50ml on eBay. Some of the notes include honey, florals, and a lot of the same stuff that I actually just listed in all the others as well, the patchouli, the oak moss, all that kind of stuff. It's musky, it's a little bit animalic. Some people in the Fragrantica reviews are mentioning a Uranus kind of vibe about this one, and that draws comparisons with Yves Saint Laurent's KOUROS. It definitely has that kind of dirty yet clean smell about it to some extent. I really actually find this one quite one of the more fascinating ones I've smelled recently. Not the one I'm reaching for to wear all the time, I'll be honest. More of a collector's item. It's definitely one of the most challenging smells on the list today, but it is very kind of manly and heavy. It's got a real kind of oak moss, patchouli undertone that so many of them have. It's compared also to Ted Lapidus Pour Homme, the powerhouse from 1987. But there's a bit more of a honey thing. There's a sweetness about this one, and perhaps a slightly more exotic feel. They're trying to conjure up the feeling of this desert in North Africa. So it does have this, maybe a hint of something suggesting incense and a more of a sweetness, a hint of the exotic, but still with this 80s powerhouse undertone. Honey, of course, is sweet, but many people think it can smell a little bit dirty or even urinous when used in fragrance, and particularly in this era. So Ténéré from PACO Rabanne, definitely one of the more challenging ones on the list. Has my bottle changed a bit over the years? The juice is old. Really, really interesting. Love having it as a collector. I'm not going to wear it every day out to the gym or anything like that, but if you can pick up a bottle of that and you're into your manly stuff, that is really rather a forgotten gem from the late 1980s. Last but not least then, this fragrance reputedly was worn by Al Pacino during the filming of Scarface. I think that was an early 80s film. The fragrance itself came out in 1978, and apparently it was really the smell of the set, because he wore a lot of it on set to get into character every day to play the Cuban gangster Scarface. So the fragrance in question is Lagerfeld Classic. The original iteration, which I guess would have been the Al Pacino era, was Lagerfeld Cologne with a slightly different logo. I'm lucky to have a vintage tester there, but I'll just refer to the modern version. This one does smell a bit richer. You can smell that, you see the juice is different. Again, you never know, the juice might have changed in its smell over the years, but the modern one actually is still really good. And I think most people think that whatever reformulations happen, they've done a good job. Very different to the other ones actually in smell. Doesn't really have the soapy, fresh, clean thing so much, this one. It's some of the notes are bergamot, nutmeg, sweet orange, estrogen, cedar, jasmine, iris, patchouli, rose, sandalwood, tobacco, amber, musk, oak, tonka, vanilla. This one is more boozy. There's a sweetness about this one. There's a strong tobacco and whiskey note, or suggestions of both those things are in here. And there is a lot of almost TCP or medicinal-esque kind of patchouli as well, so rather a challenging scent maybe to some modern noses, but really different to the others. It's got more sweetness and a boozy quality about it, and you get that feeling of the orange note, the orangey coloured juice. It reminds me of the drink liqueur or whatever it is, Cointreau, a boozy, quite strong drink with an orange flavour to it. Very, very grown up. Definitely smells of the past. Not going to be something you're going to want to wear if you're 18, 20 and you just want to be popular with other people of your own age. But if you are into collecting fragrances, you can pick up the modern version really cheaply. And Lagerfeld Cologne, if you want to smell like Scarface, really great stuff. I think I might wear it actually today, going out to the shops or something in a minute. And yeah, just a few sprays of that, I think, for a nice late autumn or middle of autumn. We're in November here. Quite appropriate, but maybe not the most obviously popular smell in the modern world, but I think it's really actually great juice and very complex, boozy, sweet orange, patchouli, heavy stuff, and definitely masculine. So those were some more of my favourite, most masculine smelling fragrances. Let me know which ones I've missed, which ones you might like to see me review in a future video, and as ever, please feel free to comment about anything that's happened in the video, and let's get involved and interact, which is the wonderful thing that we can do in the comments on YouTube. Thank you ever so much for watching. We'll see you in the next episode. Remember, whatever you're doing in life, let's project. Bye-bye.
Smelly.